Okay, I'll just introduce you. Okay. So, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for coming today. I'm Gwen Robinson, past president of the Foreign Correspondents Club of Thailand and board member. And as you know, today we're here for a briefing on the state of media freedom and suppression in the Mekong region. And we're very lucky to have with us the lineup we do. You notice it was a bit vague, the description of the panel, which is because we did not want to attract the attention of any authorities, particularly the Vietnamese who have stopped us a couple of times from running programs about Vietnam and media issues. They're very sensitive about it and we were blocked. So that's why we kept it deliberately vague, but we are very lucky to have 4 representatives from Vietnam, Cambodia, Myanmar, and that's it, and also mainly in person, which is also very rare. So we're lucky because we've got a couple of visitors here who aren't normally in Thailand. The one who is normally in Thailand on screen, Tozo Lat, the Secretary of the Independent Press Council of Myanmar, happens to be out of the country right now, so he had to zoom in. But let me just introduce our speakers and then I think hand over to them. And they're going to give some briefings with some interesting new information and then, you know, hopefully have a bit of a discussion. And before we start, there is coffee and tea available up there, or else food if you want to order from the menu. So feel free. And now over to this panel. I'd first of all like to introduce, closest to me is Quinn V. Tran, who heads legal initiatives for Vietnam, which does a lot of great work helping Vietnamese bloggers, activists and journalists. And then next to her is Michael Altman-Lupu. He's chief researcher for Project 88, which also similarly does a lot of work on Vietnam and has interesting data and research. Next to him is Jerry Flynn, who until I believe yesterday was the president of the Overseas Press Club of Cambodia. And Jerry is a real veteran in Cambodia. And because also it is almost impossible to get a Khmer journalist who is a working independent journalist to speak on camera about the real situation in Cambodia. We're very lucky to have Jerry who can represent his colleagues who are all, well, primarily all in Cambodia. And also Jerry will tell you, but he just got kicked out of Cambodia, but is very in the loop on what's the real situation there. And then, as I mentioned before, Tozo Lat on the screen there. So we'll first of all hear from V and then turn to some questions. So over to you, V. Yeah.
Thank you, Gwen. Thank you everyone for coming here today. You hear me okay, right? I mean, I know, I've been told by my Vietnamese friends that I am a loudspeaker.
Loudspeaker? I wouldn't call you loud.
But
just put your hand up if you have any issues. Yeah.
But I am a journalist for 2 online magazines that we focus on Vietnam. The shirt I'm wearing here today is, I'm gonna close this a bit so you can see. This is our co-founder and a very prominent Vietnamese journalist who's my friend, Phạm Đoan Trang. She's in her 5th year in prison in Vietnam right now for just being a writer and a journalist. And I just want to wear the shirt here to explain to you what's going on in our country, what we always tease that Vietnam is very consistent in remaining in like the top 5 jailers for journalists and writers. Freedom of expression and free press, I don't think exists in the country. But I think for me to come here to talk about the latest report that our organization had published in November of last year. And the report is public online, just that we focusing on not just the independent group like us, because for Vietnamese government, the independent media is kind of like a known enemy. But we were talking about the censorship and even the crackdown of state media. So even state media in Vietnam have the issues up by the current repression in the country. And as of yesterday, Vietnam just sentenced another journalist to prison, and he is a very well-known person. His name is Huy Đức, Trương Huy Sang, and he's been writing 2 very historical books that talked about what happened in Vietnam since the 1950 until the current day. The books was important because it reported what the Vietnamese government did not want to disclose to the public about what happened to the south of Vietnam after 1975. And he wrote the book with detailed citation, and it was a very good material to use for young people to study on our history. So he was sentenced only 30 months yesterday in prison for abusing democratic freedoms, Article 331. This is a very general article that they often use just to sentence people for whatever reason. But let's just go back about what happened in free press in Vietnam. So unfortunately, since 2019, they have increased the arrest of writers and journalists. I don't think we can say Vietnam has an independent media anymore, because they have closed down two media groups that operated as an independent media in 2019. That is Báo Sạch, which is clean newspaper, and Vietnam Thời Báo, which is like Vietnam Times. So these publications no longer exist, or if they do, they have to publish overseas. So it's sad to say that I don't think the country has any independent media inside the country anymore. My colleague and I, we live overseas. We are in Taipei, Taiwan. We can't run our magazine. We cannot have the headquarters of our magazine inside the country. So we are having our headquarters in Taipei, but we do have our staff and our writers who are based inside the country. So yeah, what happened is, Vietnam has its press law, which is very restrictive. They have penal codes with the national security law, like the Article 331 I just mentioned. And also they enacted cybersecurity law 2018. And I think my friend will talk more about what happened to the internet freedom inside the country. So what happens now is, I think in Vietnam, the general feeling is a climate of fear and self-censorship. So newsroom now operate under intense pressure, even with the state media. So journalists, they have to face job insecurity, surveillance, and potential imprisonment. Because if you can write anything that the government does not like, they can just apply Article 331, abusing democratic freedoms, to you, and the light sentence of 30 months is the least that you can hope for. So since 2016 to the present, that is the atmosphere is just intensely becoming more repressive, and the government now trying to limit even the state media. So the state media, let's say a newspaper in Vietnam, if they can call themselves a newspaper, it has to be sponsored by an official department. So each official department could only have one newspaper. So if you can think, the scenario is that, you know, some departments in the past, they would have 2 or 3 newspapers working under their umbrella. But now the law said, no, you cannot, you can only have one. What happened to like if you have 3, and they could only pick one, the other 2, what happened is they could no longer operate as a newspaper anymore. So that is how they want to limit the access of journalists. So it is increasingly repressive, and like no more independent voice. So that's a really negative and very sad part. And I don't want to come and talk about my country in that way. I would say when the state trying to suppress the state media, there is one good thing that came out. That is, there are journalists who really want to write truth. So we got more people that came to us. Of course, they could not use their real name, and they have a pen name. But we have more journalists that would come to us to write for our magazine, to express what's going on in the country. Because Vietnam has a lot of issues that I think, you know, international media also covered. So people actually really want to write as a journalist. Since October of last year, our magazine, we're training 10 young college graduates who wants to be journalists in our magazine. So yes, there is the repression. There are a lot of things that the government wants to control, but I don't think they can control every thought. So we have more people who want to join us, and these people, when they came and they understand we are an independent magazine, we don't do censorship, we don't self-censor, and I also have a co-founder who's in prison right now, but they want to work with us. So I think that's the good part, that despite all of these things that we have to face, young people in my country do not give up, and they just continue to do and work more. So that's my part. I do have the link for the report. If you can read more about what's going on with free press in Vietnam, I can give it to you. But thank you so much for coming here and listen to my presentation.
Do you want to share some highlights of the report? Like, what are the top findings? Any updates on how many in jail, how many arrested?
Since 2019, what we have documented that at least 17 independent journalists have been imprisoned, and this I don't think it counted the bloggers too. I think it's 17 independent journalists that associated with the independent media since 2019 that got imprisoned, and.
So how many would you say with bloggers included?
I don't know on the top of my head of bloggers, but I think it is included in there. At least there were 3 of the RFA bloggers that I know about. Yeah.
Is that it?
Yes.
Okay.
Thanks, Abby. I'm Michael. I am the human rights. Do you want to do questions before I jump in?
No, we'll do.
No,
questions.
that's
Okay.
the question.
I'm Michael. I'm the human rights researcher for Project 88, which is a human rights organization also focused on Vietnam, though without quite as much focus on journalism. I mean, that's where LIV really shines and is the best organization working on it at the current moment. But just to add to what Vi was talking about, I wanted to provide a little bit of context about the current wave of repression and the current crackdown in Vietnam that extends beyond journalism, but is, well, I mean, for sure included. And then I wanted to provide a little bit of information about restrictions on the internet and social media. And this is particularly important because Vietnam just issued a new decree called Decree 147, which was issued in November of last year. It took effect on Christmas Day, and it really just, I mean, even more than before, really shuts down any ability of Vietnamese citizens to post anything political on social media, to engage in any form of citizen journalism online, or really to speak out in any way without fear of imprisonment. So as Vi mentioned, since our organization says since 2020, I think 2019 is a totally reasonable also starting point, there's been a new wave of repression that the Vietnamese people are enduring. In addition to the arrests of all these journalists, there's also the last remaining independent journalist association, the last remaining independent publishing house. These have all been shut down since then. The 6 leaders of the climate change movement in Vietnam were all in prison since then, and climate activism is now not possible. Even more recently, there's now been a wave of arrests of government reformers and labor officials. It seems that similar to what was happening starting in 2021 with climate activism, potentially just starting this year, labor activism will be repressed in a similar fashion. That's not entirely clear. It's right at the start of this. It remains to be seen if this trend continues. But as part of this wave of repression, there's been a slew of new laws and new decrees that have been enacted by the government. And the one that I want to focus on today is Decree 147. So, as I mentioned, this law was just recently enacted. It was replacing Decree 72, which was enacted, I think, in 2013, which had been regulating social media since that year. But this is now the new regulations on it. So there's 6 main things that this law does. The first, it requires all users of social media to verify their account using their phone number or their national ID card. So there's no chance that anybody can be anonymous on social media in Vietnam anymore. All of their information will be collected by social media platforms, and the social media platforms under the law are required to share it with the Vietnamese government upon request. In addition, social media platforms are required to take down any posts, to suspend or remove any accounts, and groups and anything on their platforms, again, at the government request, completely left open for governments to remove anything that they want. There's no real limits to what would be considered illegal content under the law. In addition to government takedown requests, it actually allows users who make mass requests, mass reporting of posts on social media platforms. It's unclear exactly. The law does not clarify what happens, but it seems that social media platforms will be required to take down posts that are mass reported, which is a major problem in Vietnam because there are brigades of that are affiliated with the state or party that will mass report anything that is negative of the state or the party. In addition, the law prohibits independent journalism, any type of citizen journalism on social media. It explicitly prohibits posting reports or publishing reports, investigations, or interviews on social media. Again, these are left very broad, but by and large will prevent any bloggers, any independent journalists from posting anything on social media from within the country. And this has been, as we mentioned, a major problem in recent years. There's been dozens of bloggers that have been arrested for their social media posts. A recent major example was Dung Van Thai, who was sentenced in October of last year to 12 years in prison for his social media posts reporting on corruption, on money laundering schemes. In addition, and this is kind of a new thing about that case, 5 former state and party officials were also imprisoned as a result of this, as they were accused of being his informers within the government of how he was getting information. So there were 8 total arrests. He was arrested for more than a decade for this. And it seems likely that 147, maybe not his case in particular, but this type of citizen journalism is part of the reason why these restrictions are being put in place. In addition, the 147 greatly increases the Vietnamese government's ability to surveil social media. It requires social media networks to allow the Ministry of Information and Communications to access their internal search functions. So they're able to use the internal search functions of social media platforms in order to find posts that they don't like, to find users that they want to harass, imprison, threaten, whatever they might be doing. In addition, this is only true for domestic social media platforms. It was in initial versions of the law and initial drafts, it was for all social media platforms. It was removed from foreign, but it requires domestic social media platforms to install government surveillance systems into their platform, so the Vietnamese government can better surveil domestic social media platforms. So the reason why this is happening, there's a number of reasons why, but primarily it is, from what we have been able to figure out at Project 88, due to fears of foreign influence, primarily US influence, fears that the US will try to overthrow the Communist Party, overthrow the regime, and fears that as Vietnam becomes more integrated into the international community through free trade agreements and other things like that, that will also pose a threat. So we were able to uncover last year a directive called Directive 24, which was a classified national security document that outlined a laundry list of ways that the Vietnamese government planned to violate the rights of the Vietnamese people. And among these rights were a number of increased restrictions and surveillance methods on social media. It seems likely that this is in response to that. Yeah, I think that I'll leave it there. But so yes, we are like, I guess my main takeaway is while the Vietnamese government has long been restrictive of rights, this is a new wave of repression. This is not just business as usual. The last 5 years are an increase dramatically in the repression that the Vietnamese people are experiencing.
Right.
Thank you.
Michael, I might throw in one question there, which is we've also seen, though, in the last couple of years, this incredible warming of relations between Vietnam and America, really. I mean, so that would sort of suggest that might make the Vietnamese a bit more comfortable that at least under Biden, I mean, all bets are off with Trump, but we know that Trump doesn't care about, human rights and things like that. So actually it might be even more encouraging for the Vietnamese Communist Party authorities, but also in those last few years of Biden, when you even saw, arms deals like just being given the green light, and a lot of us never thought a Democrat administration would do that. So wouldn't that make the Vietnamese government more relaxed about all this?
Yeah, I think absolutely. I think so. Starting in 2014, Assistant Secretary of State Kirk Campbell from the United States outlined his pivot to Asia. And as part of this plan, it was very clear that the way that it related to Vietnam, at the very least, was that they would no longer pressure Vietnam on human rights concerns in order to increase ties between the United States and Vietnam. So this was the plan. This was under the Obama administration, but Kirk Campbell was also the Assistant Secretary of State for Asia, for the Asia region under President Biden as well. Yeah. And this policy continued. And yes, it was very notable that under the Biden administration, there was no real pushback to any of these human rights abuses. In fact, we uncovered evidence that in last year, in the United States did their trafficking in persons report for the whole world. We were given Vietnamese government documents that outlined exactly what was going on in Vietnam in terms of trafficking in persons, including multiple Vietnamese labor attaches in Saudi Arabia who were involved in a labor trafficking ring in that country that led to the death of a Vietnamese citizen. They told the U.S. publicly, and the U.S. reported that these two labor attaches were fired and were being criminally charged for this. In the internal documents that we were leaked, not only were they not being criminally charged, they were not fired. And the numbers that they were reporting to the U.S. were wildly off. We gave all of this information to the U.S. State Department before their determination of and review of the trafficking in person status of Vietnam, and they upgraded their status. They said that they were doing a better job than the year before. So there's yes, very little. I'm not sure. I think that this will. I do not expect that the Trump administration will be a defender of human rights in Vietnam. But I would say that the Biden administration was not either.
Yeah. So my question was that rather than making them more paranoid and more draconian, wouldn't that kind of relax the regime a bit more that they're getting away with it?
Yes.
But instead they kind of are ratcheting up like they're more paranoid.
Yeah, I think that's certainly, yes, sorry, I missed the key point of the question. Yes, I think that's certainly true. It's very clear as EU nations and the US are unwilling to call out Vietnam on human rights, the human rights situation is getting worse. And I think that it's pretty safe to say that, yes, the Vietnamese government is feeling more comfortable in violating rights, knowing that they are not going to receive much pushback on the international stage.
Especially under this new Trump administration, right?
Yes.
Right, okay, well that's a happy scenario. Yeah. We'll come back to that. So over to Myanmar, another happy situation. Over to you, To. You can update us on, I mean, it's all gloom and doom as far as we can see, but on top of that you've had huge funding hits because of the recent decisions by the Trump administration on just about everything they're funding, but particularly concerning Myanmar. So as Secretary of the Independent Press Council of Myanmar, I think you represent how many organisations?
Yeah, 37 media houses.
Sorry, how many?
37 media houses.
Right, 37. So you've got a fair idea of the impact on them. So maybe let us know what the latest situation is.
Menglava, thank you. Thanks, Gwen. I like to start saying, I mean, we are really sorry about our fellow journalists, you know, Hui Duke got 2-year sentence, and I got a RSF report yesterday, and we are also, I mean, solidarity with our Vietnamese friends. We are similar situation that we are facing. And then, I mean, I will start with journalism is not a crime at all, but we were regarded as a criminal for what we are reporting. Yes, Gwen, of course, you know, it is not a good time to be journalist. I mean, not only in Burma now, even in the greater Mekong region. Of course, the latest funding cut or freeze, you know, stop order, basically by USAID and also NED, National Endowment for Democracy, has a very big impact on entire independent media houses. Like Burma Myanmar media, we always say we are one food in, one food out strategy, mainly because we cannot remain as an independent media inside Myanmar, because we've been deliberately targeted, and since another military coup in February 2021. Before coups, you know, give you a bit of rough number that Burma Myanmar Press Freedom Index was 139, 1 point ahead of Thailand, because Thailand was a military government. So, but that's changed. Now we are 173 out of 180.
And that's on what index, To?
RSF Press Freedom Index. So it does not take very long, you know, 139. in 2020 to now 2024. So I mean, it's quite serious. Also, we are the second biggest jailer of journalists after China. So far, our press council recorded 43 journalists stay behind bar. 157 journalists got arrested since the 2021, and nine journalists got killed. And actually, it's more than nine. And some journalists, were in prison and then they released, and they died 3 days after they released. Also, 17 media houses license revoked or completely outlawed by current state administration, council, military government. Also, I mean, in terms of there is a recent report assessed now saying that there is a 296 internet shutdown in 2024 and happened to be Myanmar is the worst 190 times. So that is again, in terms of digital dictatorship or digital authoritarian, we are similar to Vietnam. I mean, 1st January, come on, it was a New Year day. They already restricted independent media space. There is a newly introduced cyber security law on 2025, on the New Year day. So there will be much more restriction on digital platform. So Myanmar became one of the worst internet shutdown out of 54 countries. There was recently there is a new report by the SS now. So I think this is the situation, and also I mean most of the independent, as we say, one foot in, one foot out. Usually we operate from exile and using satellite TV and also digital platform. And the way we operate is we collect news and information inside Burma, Myanmar that we package, put on our satellite TV or shortwave radio or digital platform and air back to our Burmese, inside Burma. That's how we operate. But that one is recently very scrutinized, especially going very hard on digital platform. Also, journalists being, I completely understand when my Vietnamese friend, journalists being charged with counter-terrorist law, not with the news media law. So that they got their very heavy sentence. There was recently very famous filmmaker, woman, a journalist got life sentences, and recently they reduced to 20 years. Thanks goodness. So I think journalists being, they deliberately, heavy, harsh punishment, just to remind that don't cross the line. There is an invincible line. If you cross the line, this is what you get. So this is our situation. Also, in terms of Greater Mekong region, unfortunately, Burma Myanmar is part of Mekong, and mainly the Lanchan Mekong initiative, led by China, is one of the serious issues in our country. Also, China, of course, they are the main provider of the firewall. Recently, military government, military junta restricted on the VPNs. Those technology were actually provided by Chinese. I'm talking about $36 million worth of firewall. So the China is backing up. Also, China want Myanmar into the Greater Mekong Lanchan groupings. And another serious thing about regional issues is Mytel telecommunication. It is run by Burmese army. Two biggest army run the telecommunication. Two biggest army in Southeast Asia. It is Mytel, and it is a joint venture with Viettel, owned by the Vietnamese army. So this is what, and sometimes bad guys stick around and we good guys don't stick around that much. That is the problem. But these are the, also there is a very heavy surveillance on your mobile data. There was an incident, there was a flood, and people donate. And then, the army suddenly think it is threat. So they cracked down, on those donations. They thought that, some of the local people giving donation to the resistant groups. So there is not only heavy censorship, but also there is a digital dictatorship, and also on the mobile platform. For that reason, there were not many. Two other mobile operators left. One Telenor from Norway, and one Ooredoo from Arab. They left because they don't want to share private information with the authorities. So only Mindted is actively remain in country. So I think we're going to see more restriction because there is proposed election. I don't know whether it's going to happen this year or next year. Then there will be more restriction and more targeting over the independent media. So because of this absence of independent media space inside our country, so we have to do exile or one food in, one food out strategy. But now that one also trying to survive, barely survive because of all these funding crisis. Because when we were in our own country, I'm a broadcaster. I used to be the bureau chief for Democratic Voice of Burma, the television station that we got licensed, and we were able to manage some commercial income from the advertisement and other activity sponsorship. But that one no longer applicable for us since we are in exile in Thailand or other places, India or even in Australia, and then we lost those kind of commercial income. So I think now, out of our membership, 37 membership, smaller one really barely survive, big one and trying to reduce with we call it survival mood to continue. But we will continue our independent reporting because Army only one version of truth, which is the Army version of truth. So we, as a journalist, will continue providing, unbiased news and information to Burmese population from one food and one food out exile. Although we're facing many challenges, on top of that, the recent U.S. funding cut on media houses, we will continue our independent reporting. But my last point, of course, we in the region also, we need to stick together because of those bad guys stick together, and the journalism is not a crime at all. And no journalist should go to jail. I'm sorry to hear Vietnam is a fifth jailer of journalists. There is no way that journalists should go and in jail for what they are reporting. Thank you very much.
Right, thanks, To. And why do you think it is that Myanmar media has been hit particularly hard as opposed to other independent medias of the region, apart from the fact that Vietnam has been totally levelled by Law's warfare, but generally, was it more dependent on US funding than other medias? And could you just speak up, maybe speak a little more clearly?
Okay. Actually, we have a kind of diverse revenue streams, and US is one of them, and not main, and along with CEDA, Sweden or EU or other Scandinavia. But in terms of media development or independent media, I think probably around 30% of entire industry and their revenue streams gone. Of course, we're not going to die because there is some other funding stream, but also we're trying to get more revenue from online, like Google AdSense and also Facebook recently have a new Meta as a new income stream. But most of the media houses, the income not over 10% of operational costs. I know small or large. I work with Myanmar Media. We got 21 million audience on our Facebook
you got
page.
21 what, sorry? Million?
21 million audience.
For who?
Myanmar Media.
Right.
Also, we are one of the top 5 on YouTube. And I'm sure, I mean, like TVB, other, when we're talking about audience side, we have a very, I mean, size-saver audience. I mean, at least 20 or 21 or 25. We quite enjoy. I mean, there is more demand for independent content. But our operation is, I mean, because it is very difficult and expensive from reporting from close country, because there is delivery, communication card, VPN, and you have to use satellite facility, other complicated network, you know. So also the verification is very expensive job. Also, journalism is all about verification, and also very difficult to verify from the conflict area. Burma, Myanmar is heavily, we have in a big saver, or heavily conflict driven information happening in Burma. So I think all these issues, you know, impact on our daily work. But as I said, no one is going to stop. We were. I mean, I've been in journalism for less 30 years,
Right.
and we've been through many barriers and challenges. I mean, so I think we will overcome this crisis. But of course, you know, definitely there will be quantity and quality reporting will drop due to lack of funding. But we will try our best to continue, you know, informing our citizens what is going on in their own country.
Okay, thank you. And Jerry, we're going to move across to Cambodia, and maybe you can update. You obviously personally don't have a great impression or happy things to say about the situation, but there's two things going here. One is the dynamic where there was a lot of Western or foreign freelancers in Cambodia because the regime was, I mean, surprisingly relaxed about foreign journalists coming and going. And then the separate thing is the Khmer journalists themselves. So I think you're wearing a couple of hats there, and hopefully you can update us on both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, well, I don't know if you can hear me okay.
Yep.
Yeah, over to Cambodia for the good news, I guess. Yeah, I think Cambodia, it did have that history for a long time, since the UNTAC days in the 90s of being able, you know, the Cambodian government was essentially forced to pretend to be more democratic than it was and, you know, put up this sort of mirage of abiding by best practices and international standards. So, you know, you did have, for a period of time, in an otherwise pretty dark region for media freedoms, Cambodia was a bit of an odd, bright spot. That has sadly changed, and that's been changing now for at least a decade, probably since about 2016 when the Cambodia Daily was, 2017 when the Cambodia Daily was shut down, 2018 when the Phnom Penh Post was then forcibly sold to government-friendly interests, and that was at the time a large part of what made up the free press in both English language and Khmer language. So they're long gone. However, it did leave a lot of journalists, both Cambodian and foreign, in the country, you know, and all quite determined to try and do something with those skills. And, you know, there was a proven appetite for genuine, independent, unbiased news within Cambodia and beyond. And so, yeah, the situation has sadly deteriorated. The Overseas Press Club of Cambodia, where I was until yesterday, the president, we went from having, I think, several hundred members in the early 2000s to now around 40. And of those 40, probably around 10% are actually, maybe, well, 20% are actually full-time journalists. You know, one of the big problems that we're facing at the moment now is there are no jobs. The newspapers were shut down, the online news sites have been shut down, blocked. So everyone is freelancing, and there's not enough money, appetite for stories from Cambodia and outlets to sustain people, really. We have seen sadly, some journalists take jobs with the government, some taking jobs with marketing agencies, or just doing whatever they can to survive, because there's not a sustainable future for them in journalism anymore. And so, while the Overseas Press Club of Cambodia, we have been trying to advocate for journalists in Cambodia, for journalism. Been trying to provide opportunities mostly for Cambodian journalists, because I think it's becoming clear that they are very much the future of journalism in Cambodia, and perhaps this time next year it won't be a white guy sat here talking about Cambodia. It'd be nice to see a Cambodian do this. But obviously the risks are still very serious. As Gwen mentioned, even myself, I was actually kicked out of the country at the start of this year, and am now permanently banned after 5 years of reporting from Cambodia. So yeah, the situation is not looking good. And it's only really getting worse. I think 2023, we saw the government shut down Voice of Democracy, which was kind of the next iteration of the free press in Cambodia. It was purely online, but again, both in English and Khmer, Cambodian journalists and foreign journalists working together, and they did some incredible work, exposed some horrific crimes. The birth of the scam compounds, these originated in Cambodia. They've now spread to Laos, Myanmar, and elsewhere. And VOD was among the front runners who were really bringing this to light, with every day a news story detailing some new atrocity. So they were shut down for accurately quoting a government spokesperson. The government maintained the spokesperson was wrong, and that VOD should somehow have recognized that. So they're gone. Even Cam Notra, a very short-lived attempt to just compile documents from the government, so official government decrees and laws, and then translate them into English, that was shut down by the government. And now we are left with effectively one independent outlet, Cambodia News, and they are very small, desperately underfunded, and now, thanks to Trump and Musk, even more so underfunded. Although obviously it sounds like this is a problem that we're all experiencing in this room, and it's pretty depressing that we're all having to compete with our crises to try and get attention and money. But yeah, ultimately, Cambodia, despite having used to be this fairly vibrant spot, we had a shift in government in 2023, where long-time leader, let's say, Hun Sen, shifted power. He ceded power to his eldest son, Hun Manet, who was formerly the army chief. And there was a lot of chatter, particularly among some fairly fresh-faced and optimistic diplomats, that Manet and his whole gang of new Nepo babies, really, they're all the children of former government officials taking over their father's role. And it's typically the sons as well, very few of the daughters, notably. But yeah, there was a little bit of optimism and hope that this new administration might be more liberal, might be more receptive to the Western values. Manet is a graduate from West Point in the US. He did his PhD at Bristol University in the United Kingdom. People anticipated that he would be something of a reformer, but if anything, the situation has actually deteriorated at a more alarming rate. We've seen, I think 2023 to 2024 saw the highest number of arrests in terms of political prisoners, and so this includes journalists, human rights activists, a variety of people across civil society who have been targeted. And that has really just continued. I think the situation is now being, the repression is now being codified in terms of, we're seeing new legislation being brought in by the Cambodian government in August last year, August 2024. Cambodian government they ratified the press charter, which makes having a government-issued press pass a legal requirement, which might not sound like a particularly big deal, but we're already getting reports now that independent journalists who had been working last year have been mysteriously denied a press pass this year. And so we're unsure exactly what enforcement is going to look like, how the government will actually prevent people from doing journalism without a press pass. But we also assumed that foreign journalists were somewhat off the table in terms of repercussions, and I am sat here before you today. So, yeah, all in all, I'd say the situation is pretty dire. Obviously, it's no Myanmar, it's no Vietnam, and it's certainly not Laos, but I think it's heading in that direction. There's a very real risk that Cambodia slips into an information black hole.
And do you think the other restrictions and the requirements now, the legal ones required of journalists to be journalists, the same for foreigners as Khmer?
Yes, I mean, it'll apply across the board. I think with foreign journalists, they will perhaps have other tools that they could use, work permits, visas. You know, there will be other bureaucratic mechanisms that they can use to exclude or silence critical journalists, which they've always struggled with, by contrast to Cambodian journalists who typically have family in the country. Maybe their families will be denied basic government services, or they will be threatened. You know, we've had people where, like, journalists' families have had threats from the government suggesting that their businesses will be affected, their land could be taken. You know, it's the government has leverage over Cambodian journalists in ways that it never has over foreign journalists. Whereas I think this new administration, being a younger generation of slightly more savvy technocrats, are trying to find quiet ways to silence a long-standing, unruly foreign press.
Right. Well, thank you. I have to say, I think that's a fairly grim, a very grim prognosis from you all. So, not a happy outlook. You know, the obvious question is, what next? And does this mean, particularly when you're looking at the collapse of jobs, the absolute slash in funding from particularly the US for particularly Myanmar media, the Vietnamese government making it almost impossible to work. I mean, you know, what is the conclusion here? Do any of you have thoughts on that? I mean, should the media just give up? I mean, you know, all these very brave people, I must say, in Vietnam, even the bloggers should be applauded. In fact, bloggers have almost less protection because they're not professional journalists and they're just getting picked off left, right and centre. So it's kind of like almost suicidal, right? That they would do a post and then, of course, they're going to get arrested, then they're going to get locked up for 10 years or 15 years.
Or just
But
30
they keep
months.
doing it. Why do they keep doing it, do you think?
Well, I just want to jump in and say we are not giving up. Actually, in the contrary, in the last few months, we have been publishing more, both in Vietnamese and also on our English websites, because we cannot give up. I mean, and the way I look at Vietnam right now is that, you know, we have a lot of changes in our political platform in the last 8 months. Since our top leader just passed away in July, we have a new guy. There are, right now, I really do not know what this new person will do. Right now, I'm looking at him to see that he is consolidating power within his own party. So Vietnam only has one political party, and they are fighting tooth and nails among themselves to know which one will be the top. So the top guy right now, his position is only safe until 2026. That's when Vietnam has their party's Congress. From some political opinions that I collected, it seems like he's been successfully fight off his other factions. So maybe this person will be the next one. Vietnam's history of the media in the last, I would say 20 years, it's up and down. Okay, it's not always be so repressive like the last 5-6 years. In the early 2000s, there was actually a pretty good time for Vietnam's journalists to write about corruption, to expose certain things in the country. It was a more vibrant time. And what happened was when the guy who just died last year took power in 2016 to this day, that faction of him was a most conservative group of the Vietnamese Communist Party. So the VCP has this really, really conservative person who became the top leader since 2016 until last year. So with him, everything got really shut down. It was a really tough time. If you look at all of the imprisonment in Vietnam with the top numbers, it also happened in the end of 2015 until like last year. So it was a tough time. So right now, it is the unknown time for us. Yes, the law is like that, the censorship is that. We still do have people who still want to write. So that's why we're trying to get more people to join and continue to do our work. I mean, if we don't, then that means they won, and all of 20 years from now, if you read about Vietnam, it's only coming from the VCP. So actually, we actually work harder, and with the freezing funds from the U.S., we got affected a bit, but we also have subscriptions of our Vietnamese language magazine, and the people in Vietnam actually supported us. They actually bought subscriptions for us. So I think, yes, this is the government's like that, but I do not give up hope in the Vietnamese people and the need and the desire to read information that truthful and hold the power to accountable. I think the people always want to do that, and that's how we survived. This is not 1 or 2 years. We've been working on this 2 newspapers for the last 10 years. And so this is not the time to give up. I think
These
this is
are
the
which
time
papers?
to fight. Our Le Croix magazine has been in 10 years. By November of last year, that's marked our 10 years of publication in Vietnam as an independent media. And the readers, they still read and they still join to write. So I think this is not the time to give up. We've been through so much. We need to continue. And who knows? I mean, sometimes you don't really can guess the future. I live in Taipei, Taiwan. So I talk to a lot of Taiwanese activists, people in that country. In 1987, they didn't think that the KMT would lift up the martial law and start the democratization of the country. So I'm a very hopeful person. I think I would continue to do this work. And the younger generation that we are training right now give me hope, because they are still doing these kind of things, want to learn and how to write independently and truthfully. So, yeah, so this is a time we have to be stronger.
Thank you, that's encouraging. And Tozo Lat, what do you think amongst the Myanmar community, which is possibly also equally, very bleak and desperate, especially with the funding cuts? What do you think is the impact? I mean, number one, it's clear there are too many. Myanmar publications to support this shrinking funding space. Sorry, you're on mute. We can't hear you.
Okay, sorry. I think we're not going to give.
Start again.
We're not going to give up.
Can you speak up, please?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, a little bit better, but can you speak up? Yeah.
We are not going to give up. So far, we just did one exact media mapping. There are 63 media houses.
You
Big and
did
small.
what, sorry?
Exact media mapping. So we figured out, there are 63 media houses. Some are national coverage, some are regional coverage, some are ethnic coverage. So we did a survey. But what we are going to overcome these challenges is collaboration and coordination. Instead of competing each other, we will complement each other. That is a solution. For example, there is a big conflict in Rakhine, and there is a Rakhine-based media. Then we will not do, other media house will not chase the news and information from Rakhine. We will focus other area. Then we can combine our content. So this is a kind of more collaboration. And also big media houses used to have one studio each. We might not be able to have one studio each, but we may have one combined studio, but we have to manage. So I think we're finding a way. We are not going to drop that for this, challenging situation. We will continue, to serve our people rights to information, whatever, whichever way. But of course, there will be much more challenge in terms of quality than quantity. But I think, in a way, we already decided we've been series of engagement and meeting to collaborate and complement each other. So this is the only way out. And also, very little chance to look for this funding vacuum, maybe EU or other. But we still have some support from not from US, and also some. Also, we find more revenue stream, commercial income, not only digital platform, but also content sales or many other, targeting there are like 6 million Burmese in Thailand, diaspora, and also subscription. And we find we will do more income generating stream as well. So in essence, we're not going to drop that, and we're not going to give up. But
That's
we will
good to know. That's very good to know.
We will change the way we operate. And also as a press council, we are giving some emergency relief. Some journalists, suddenly there is no salary, no money to pay for rent and no food. So we try to address, this short-term emergency relief. So we are also doing some kind of fundraising for those immediate need or immediate, but younger, smaller journalists. That's what we are trying our best.
Okay.
But I'm sure we're not going to finish.
Thank you. And Jerry, you more or less said what you thought, but I don't know what your Cambodian colleagues think, because they have fewer options than you foreign guys who are operating in Cambodia. You can leave, but I presume the options are more limited for Cambodia. They can leave, but it's harder, obviously.
Yeah, obviously the Cambodian journalists that are still going out there and reporting in an increasingly hostile environment, then the risks are far greater. But I think kind of echoing what everyone else on the panel has been saying, things are bad, but they're always bad. It's when was the last time it was good to be a journalist in Cambodia? It's
or anywhere.
Or anywhere. So I think and looking at some of the younger Cambodian journalists that are that entered the industry in the last sort of 5 years or so, there's a tremendous level of dedication. They are very well trained. They've worked typically bilingually. So realistically, they just need somewhere to work. That's the only thing that's preventing,
Right.
a decent future for journalism in Cambodia. And we've seen the government's capabilities to just trash anything that's built domestically.
Right.
There's obviously a need to move away from that donor model of like non-profit media, I think, because that has, at least in Cambodia, it's just been far too easy for the government to demonize and portray as sort of like a foreign-funded color revolution type thing. And ironically, actually, the US government's funding freeze did kill a multi-million-dollar project to examine new business models for media outlets in Cambodia. So that we'll never know, I guess. But yeah, I think it's not done. We're not dead. Even for me, okay, I'm stuck on the wrong side of the border, but we'll carry on. And for the Cambodians, of course, I know they're going to carry on.
Excellent. I hope you're right. And if anyone would like to ask a question, yes, please, and identify yourself. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Saul Zatka of Arise News Network. I'm talking to you, Jerry. When it comes to Manet, we always ironically assume that because he or some other people like him were educated in the West, Bristol or Key West, they would be less ruthless than their father. The son of Hafez al-Assad, Bashar, is just one example. The son of Colonel Gaddafi, Saif al-Islam, is another example. Both of them were educated in London, although one of them bribed the university that awarded him a PhD. So do you think that Manet would not be worse than his father, or would it be alternatively subject to some pressure by the West in order to mend the way of his father? And also, with regards to a different issue, how was the assassination of Kim Limya was covered by the official Cambodian media? Because it seems to me that they are trying to cover up the circumstances under which he was assassinated, blaming others and not, of course, the government itself.
Yeah, no, thank you for the question. It's a good one. I mean, I think, we should definitely not take Western education as any sort of guarantee. North Korea has provided a pretty good example on that one, I think. With Manet, I think it's very important to remember that Hun Sen is still alive most of the time when a son takes over from a father in a sort of dynastical dictatorship. It's because one of them's dead. And in this case, we have Hun Sen not only alive and initially declaring he was retiring from politics, but also then coming back and saying, actually, no, I'm going to be president of the Senate, which it sounds like a kind of symbolic role, but actually it means that in the event the King of Cambodia leaves the country, the president of the Senate is de facto in charge. So it's a very powerful role that he's granted himself effectively. I think when Hun Sen is perhaps no longer in the picture, then we will see maybe what the real Hun Manet looks like. But I wouldn't be overly optimistic that will be any better. I think one slight issue we have in Cambodia is that the people in charge at the moment, they don't have the same historical credentials as most of their fathers and predecessors. They didn't fight the Khmer Rouge. They didn't survive that period of time, and so they, I believe, seem to be a little insecure. They're certainly more thin-skinned. They are responding with far more hostility and aggression to media reports that I think the older generation would have been thick-skinned enough to leave alone. But we will have to see. In terms of Lim Kim Ya, the former opposition politician who was shot and killed in Bangkok in, January 7th this year? I think domestically, Cambodia has not really reported much on this. largely because, again, there are not many independent media outlets left. The independent journalists that remain are largely freelancing for regional or international publications, which did obviously cover the assassination, and the subsequent arrests and developments in the case. Whereas I think, there has been quite a concerted effort, and you can see this coded into the language that Cambodian politicians are using when they talk about this case. They don't want to talk about it. They want it to just disappear. They're making some fairly contradictory claims about what they have done and what the Thai government then claims. And so I think, unfortunately, perhaps a lot of Cambodians are not going to know exactly what's happening unless they are reading international news or accessing sites like RFA through a VPN or something.
Thanks for that, Jerry. Yes, please.
Yes.
Sorry, if you want to ask a question, you have to line up over there. And I think that will be the last one, so 3 of you.
Am I lined up? Thank you, Sam Wright, club member. I'm wondering about technology and who is your audiences as reporters? Is it your native country, or is it outsiders, or both? And also, is there access to the internet, access to the outside world that comes in electronically in some form that provides information in your countries?
Yeah, good question. I think that's open to all, right? Who is your audience? Well, V, you've made it clear you have
Yes.
you're very happy with the readership, but you didn't actually specify who you think your readers are.
Yes.
It must be quite risky for Vietnamese living in Vietnam to be reading your publications.
I think when we assess risk coming from outside, it may not be accurate. So I would say 85% of our readership for the Vietnamese language magazine came from the country. 85% of our subscription for that magazine came from the country as well. It's very courageous of them to do that, to donate money for us monthly, because it's traceable in Vietnam if you donate it to us. So I think, yes, of course it is a risk, and we probably would not get as many as we could have, but it is to show that Vietnamese people are willing to take that risk to read our newspapers. We also have an English language magazine, and I hope more of you can read it. We are trying to publish more in the English magazine on Vietnam's issues, not just human rights, but also political and social issues within the country. Because, to be honest, I grew up in the US, but around the world when I go, I know people do not know much about Vietnam as a country. And there are a lot of misinformation about what's going on in that country too. So I think we are trying to explain what it is like really in that country. So yes, I mean, people are facing up, high numbers of prison for writing, but the readers, they have not been reporting to us of any risk that they were reading our magazine. I think in the last few months, every month we have about 200 to 300,000 readers every month. We also have a YouTube channel that we just broke 100,000 subscribers recently, and every week we grow by like 1,000 for the YouTube channel. Because Vietnam is a little brother of China, but it's not like China. They can access Facebook, Twitter, all kinds of social platforms, and YouTube. So Vietnamese young generation, they are very familiar with these kind of platforms, and they supporting us. I wish I can translate some of the comments on our Facebook and our YouTube so you can see how encouraging it is for us to do this kind of work. Because the people who watch us and read us, they gave us a lot of encouragement, that you should do this. You guys are the real newspaper. That's what some of them were writing to us recently. So yeah, so we are really, the Vietnamese language magazine that we do, we are focusing on the people inside the country. 90% of my staff who's writing for us are inside the country. And it's my hair turned white because I need to find way to protect them. So we the headquarters living in exile, but we focus on the people inside the country because we think that's how we can make changes inside that country, right? Yeah.
Yes, and maybe you could say, how does that, like 200,000, compare to the top rating? I mean, I presume it's all state media, but what's the top rating, most read publication in Vietnam?
I don't know that answer, so I have to call my colleague and ask.
No, that's all right. You don't have to call anyone.
The guy who found this magazine, he's very happy with that number, so I think we are okay.
Do you know, Michael?
No, I'm not sure. There's also, in Vietnam, there's a lot of, they're called general information websites, which are reposts of state media that are also quite popular. There are thousands of general information websites that repost state media, and I'm sure, of course, some people know the answer of which one's the biggest, but there's a lot of different options.
Oh, interesting.
So,
and how about, sorry, go on.
I just want to quickly jump in because
sure.
Vi did not mention it. Her English newspaper, it's The Vietnamese Magazine. You can find it at thevietnamese.org. They are wonderful, and I highly recommend all of you who are interested in reading about Vietnamese news that do not speak Vietnamese, go to her website. It's great.
You might want to say the name of it in English.
Yeah. So it's thevietnamese.org. That's our English website.
Yeah, the Vietnamese, one word.
Yes, one word, no cap. .org.
Okay.
And you can subscribe and read it. We do have a news briefing every week on what's going on inside the country.
Which is free.
Which is free, and unless you want to donate to us.
Right.
I never asked for money on that website, and everyone's like, you should ask, and I'm like, I don't know. I need to publish more, right? I need to have more content before shamefully asking for.
But I mean, your content is fantastic, so
thank you, Michael.
you should keep it up. Yeah. But also, just very quickly, regarding audiences, and I mean, our website is blocked in Vietnam. But that said, I mean, you can access it with a VPN, and our Vietnamese language articles dramatically the articles that we publish in Vietnamese dramatically outperform the articles that we publish in English. So there is a voracious appetite among Vietnamese language speakers. I don't know where they're coming from because they're accessing it with a VPN, but I assume most of them are in Vietnam. So I just want to point out that.
Oh, interesting.
That's important. There is a market, or not a market, but there's an appetite again for news about human rights violations in Vietnam.
Interesting. And Tozolat, Myanmar is odd because some of the strongest performing websites are English language. So you've got a mixture of English and Myanmar, both in this country and, the diaspora abroad. What do you identify as your key audiences?
It is mainly the satellite TV, head-to-head with the digital platform. We did a 2024 BBC Media audience survey.
Right, BBC Burmese, right?
BBC Media Action did a media audience survey. They did already 2 years by the support of Internews and USA. So we figured out that, I mean, the main, one of the major, because we do satellite TV and shortwave radio and digital. So the biggest audience, I'm talking about around 25 million and a day on both, digital and satellite platform. So we got those data. And also now they put in VPN, basically targeting Facebook. So we put on Telegrams and TikToks and other platforms, and YouTube. So we also diversify our content in the digital platform. But we were, I think, one of the most effective ways is satellite TV. And also, of course, globally and regionally, radio is dying. But we are also reactivating very primary, we even go back to some print in some of the conflict-torn area because a lot of online is off. So we go back to radio and also print. So the main platform is satellite TV and digital platform.
Right. Thank you. And Jerry, I think you gave us the answer about who the audiences are. There's not much left to read, right?
No, not really. I mean, other than the fact that, yes, I think the Khmer language articles will always do better than English. I think that's kind of a given. It's one of the things that makes the Mekong region such a tough one to try and get like a regional publication going, because you've got such a mix of languages. But I mean, I think also, things like formats really seem to matter. 3,000 word article in English that I wrote about rainforest being cut in half. Okay, that gets maybe views in the tens of thousands, most of that from international readers. That story gets picked up by Radio France International's Khmer service. They take the photos, chop it up into like a 3-minute video with a short narration summarizing the key points. That gets over 1 million views once shared on Facebook, and Cambodians really do pay attention if it's in a format, in a language that they can digest. So yeah, I think that's a key lesson.
Well, no wonder the government doesn't like you.
I give them plenty of reasons every month, don't worry.
Well, Jerry's being modest. His publication, Mongabay, he's done a lot of fantastic work for them on environmental and other issues. That possibly doesn't thrill the government, but anyway.
We're going to carry on.
So, Marguerite, and then one last question.
Thanks, Gwen. It'll be quick because you asked my question.
Sorry.
It was specifically, Marguerite from Crisis Group, and the question was specifically on audience reach in Myanmar. And the figure you gave, 25 million total, I just want to clarify, is that for Myanmar media, or is that all of independent media in Myanmar? And the second part of that is, I believe that was from, did you say a year or two ago? Have you seen big fluctuations since that point? Are there parts of the country that you know are not able to access independent media? It'd be interesting if you have any more information to hear a bit more about that.
You're on mute again, To.
Actually, BBC...
Can you speak up, please?
BBC Media Action survey all the existing television channel, including state channel and army channel, which is one of the dominant. But in terms of news, Myanmar it's 28%, and then DVB is 90%, and then followed by Kithit. Kithit is a 16%. Kithit only do the digital platform.
But 28% of what?
To the audience. All audience. That's why they spread out.
This is in English language or everything?
It is available in English language, but it is, owned by in the news. Right. It is for the media house audience survey. It is called 2024 BBC Media Action and National Audience Surveys.
Right.
So we know exactly, so it is altogether around 30 million and audience, and one household, 5 people. That's how, there is also sample size is very huge. It's more than 2,000. They did survey all inside Burma. It is a big project because Exile Media need to know who are our audience. So I think this is the number available. So it's not only one Myanmar. Myanmar is one of the most rich, and then followed by DVB, and then Kithit, and there is a 10. And I think surprisingly, state TV, MRTV and Myawaddy Army TV, they rank maybe 6 or 7. So they are also in there. and also with other smaller one,
Right.
region and ethnic media reach.
Okay.
So there are a lot of blackout, mainly in Rakhine, because in Rakhine, most of the town under AA, Arakanese Army sees. There are 70 township, 14 is completely under AA, and only 3 left. It's also just a matter of time. So I think there is a very complete communication blackout, same to northern part and Laos and also Kitchen. And so
Okay.
most of the area that controlled by resistance, there is a complete blackout in terms
Thank
of
you.
communication.
Okay, thank you very much. And finally, last question, please keep it short.
I'm Kalinga Seniratna from research fellow at Srinivatra University. Actually, last few weeks I have been reading in the media in Asia, not in the Western media, about this USAID cuts, and especially in Sri Lanka, India, and also Hong Kong, about how, in the name of democracy, they have been funding chaos in countries, creating chaos. Now, my question is not about that, but for the speaker from Myanmar. There's 2 stories I have been chasing up. I have asked one of my friends at Yangon University, because I had done guest lectures there before the military coup, for stories for a news service. One is about how Western sanctions have impacted on food security inside Myanmar. And the other one is on who is funding and arming rebel groups. Because it looks like those who are funding and arming rebel groups are those who wants to create chaos in the region, destabilize the region. And it has also spilled over to India, to Manipur state now. Now, your media, the independent media, have you done any reports on that? Because I have been looking for reports, I can't find on those 2 topics.
Okay, you want to answer that very quickly? It's not strictly about our topic.
I mean, we don't have, the security is the biggest concern. Even human security, your life is, very, under very dangerous situation. So food security, or, that is maybe not very priority. I don't think anybody is doing on that, because we have a 330 township, 210 township is under heavy conflict, and 93 township is under complete resistance control. So actually, army is losing control, a lot of territorial control. It's not a temporary setback. It seems like going to be permanent, and they're going to lose more territory. In this regard, no one actually, to be honest, actually working on food security, because your life is at stake, as risk. And second, who fund the resistance? That's $1 million question. Basically, it is a very safe funder. There is no big, donor, but there was a recently Northern Alliance. I think Chinese accused like $200 million a month funded by U.S. And then resistance saying that if they got that much money, they already took over Naypyidaw, capitals of Burma, Myanmar. So there is no, it is a very interesting model that mainly it is the people, quietly donating, like our Vietnamese friends, subscription from Vietnam. And the resistance is fully funded by self-funder. And also, because of this territorial control, they enjoy a lot of taxation. And also, if you look at all the border trade, I'm talking about, Burma, Myanmar is very informal economy. If you look at China, Myanmar, border trade, India, Myanmar, Thai, Myanmar, all these important border trade are under resistance control. So they're getting some kind of funding out of that.
Okay, thank you very much, To. And on that, I'd just like, there's 2 things I wanted to leave you with. One is, Tommy, I wanted to give a plug to the FCCT's new podcast, which is not just sound, it's also visual, very well shot, very well edited, which is premiering next week, right? Sorry? Right, I thought you had an evening. here. Anyway. Okay. Sorry, you just wanted to make the note that it's running now, free of charge. And also, for those of you interested in Myanmar, which many of you might be because you're here, it hasn't gone on our website yet, but on March 10 we are doing a special book launch and talk by So Myint, the founder of Myanmar, who's written his kind of memoirs. He has a very unusual life, having been a hijacker as well as all sorts of things, to launch when the initial coup happened in 1988. So he'll be speaking at that on March 10, and that'll be a special event. So watch for that, and also keep an eye on our website and Facebook for other events, including about Myanmar and the region. So thank you very much for coming, and thank you very much to our speakers. It was great to have you. Thank you, Tozolat, for staying up in Australia. I know it's 3 or 4 hours difference, right?
Yeah.
4 hours.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Yes.
Bye.
Bye.
I probably should leave pretty soon. Yeah.
But let's have a little photo.
Yes, let's have a photo.
My flight's not until 11. I still have